Today's topic, we have a showdown. The 3 best versus the 3 worst places for your emergency fund. I'll be honest, it's really not a competition. You don't want to have the latter 3 that we're going to walk through. You really only want to have the first 3, but it sounded much cooler for the intro. But we are going to walk through it. We're going to walk through 3 of the best spots for the emergency fund, followed by 3 of the worst spots for the emergency fund, and a little bit of detail on the reason behind them. And I will give a shout out here. I will say this topic is inspired by Christine Benz. She's over at Morningstar. I actually love her content. If you've not read her before, probably one of the best writers out there for personal finance. Always have tidbits in our WealthKeel Weekly. I think we probably have one of her articles every single week. She actually did a full write down of the 10. That inspired me. I tweaked it a little bit based on how I feel about it, but very close to what she had. But she's, again, an excellent writer, fantastic in the world of personal finance. So if you've not read her stuff before, again, she's over at Morningstar. She is a rock star, to say the least. So let's get into it. Let's hit the 3 best, the 3 worst. But if you have not done so yet, please subscribe to the channel. You know we don't have an intro video anymore. Thumbs up, spread the message, click on the bell icon, get a notification every time we release a new video, weekly. That's right. That's it. That's the pitch. Let's find out what's the best and the worst for your emergency fund. All right. We're going to start on the bad side first, and I'm going to work in reverse order. So what I'm going to give you now is the 3rd worst, right? And then I'm going to work it down to the worst, and then we'll hit the best. So where do we start? Well, this one should not come as a surprise. At least I hope not if you're searching personal finance videos on YouTube. Credit card. Your credit card should not be an emergency fund. Why? Well, simple fact, because of something known as interest rates. Even those of you with the best credit, you're likely somewhere in the high teens, probably very close to 20, even with a great 800 plus credit score. That's why your credit card should never be an emergency fund. Now, when we walk through all of these topics, I get it. Life happens, right? And sometimes you're going to get caught in a bad spot. Or let me rephrase that. What if you are very good at what you do and you have all this money set up in your emergency fund, in one of the good ones we're going to get to at the end, but you're going to put on your credit card quick to get some points? No problemo. I have no problem with that. Just make sure you pay it off immediately after. Get the points, get the trip, get the cool gadgets. I don't care what you do there. Just make sure you pay it off, right? Make sure you get it paid off. So credit card is by far our worst option. Again, we know that life happens, but we're trying to avoid this at all cost. This is why we're going to work towards the positive 3 so that we can avoid these moments, right? So worst one, the one that you want to avoid most, never labeled as your emergency fund, is your credit card. What comes after that? We manage 401k plans for a few of our clients. We only like small plans. We don't like, you have more than 20 employees. That's too much for us, because there is a lot of communication. And one of the communications that breaks my heart the most is when someone contacts us and they say, can I take a loan for my 401k? Oh, cool, I can. I'd like to do that. Breaks my heart. Breaks my heart. But again, not talking down on anyone, because I get it, life happens. But we're trying to avoid this, right? These are the reason why we have these conversations. And most 401k plans, 403b plans, will allow for something called hardship withdrawals, or even 401k loans. You can technically take a loan out. Now, I'd actually, if we had a preference there and you're going to pay it back, I don't love a 401k loan still, but that's a lot better than a hardship withdrawal. That's where, taxes, penalties, it's kind of a mess there. So we're trying to avoid that at all costs. Even with a 401k loan, we don't love that. Now, if you take out a loan and the market plummets, right? Well, you time that one well. But what if the opposite happens, right? Take it out and the market does really well for a period of time. It depends on how quickly you pay back the loan too. Pay it back quickly, then we're not too concerned about it. But second one that we're trying to avoid at all costs, definitely 401k hardship withdrawals. That means you're taking the money out of the 401k and you have no intention of putting it back. Again, your plan probably has a 401k loan. 401ks are usually limited. Most plans, I think, cap at $50,000. Actually, that may be a Department of Labor regulation, but you want to keep that off this is my emergency fund. Not ideal. Third one on the list. I just realized, I think I said my order wrong. So I'm working these in order from worst to still really bad, right? So credit cards are the worst one. I think I may have described that incorrectly there at the start. But credit cards, our worst option. Second one was the 401k hardship withdrawal. So now we're on to still not great, but not as bad as credit cards, and that's a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. If this is a new term for you, when you have equity in your home, key is you have to have equity in your home, you can take out something called a HELOC. You can also make this a fixed product and take it out as a home equity loan, right? Let's assume this is a HELOC, which is always, I describe it as really just a big credit card. But your rate is usually much better than a credit card. Why? Because your home is the collateral. So heaven forbid you just say, I'm not paying this thing. Downside is your home's backing it up. So be very careful here. Now, in full disclosure, do we tell clients to sometimes take out a HELOC as a backup emergency fund while they're getting the next bucket that we're going to go to, right? Our top three built up. We do. Now, it doesn't happen often, right? Because it's not a very common sequence where someone comes to us, they have no emergency fund, but they have a home with a lot of equity in it. It happens every now and then, right? We just had a big housing boom, so it's probably more common now than it ever was, a decade before that, but not very common. So we're trying to avoid this at all costs. You don't want to be using that because, again, the main thing is that your home is the collateral. Even though the rates here should be a lot better, like a lot better than your credit card, we're trying to avoid this. So these are the three worst. And again, just so I'm very clear here, the one that we dislike the most, credit cards. Quickly behind that, we're going to call it the 401k hardship withdrawal. A little bit different than the loan. The loan probably would come right after that though, but the loan, at least I know your goal is to pay it back, right? With the withdrawal, taxes, penalties, that's like locked in. We're in trouble there. And then my favorite, least likely, or least favorable, I should say, is the HELOC. But again, full disclosure, every now and then, not a bad backup plan while you're getting the next three built up. All right. So those are our three worst. What is a good one then, you may ask? Well, let's get into it. Now, this one I'm going to do it the way that I described earlier. Third on the list, third best. I'm going to work my way. We're going up on this one, right? Third best, good old taxable account, right? Your individual brokerage, your joint brokerage account, that is a spot that we like. But here's the kicker. Low risk, very low risk. Like we're talking like money markets, government treasuries. I'm going to allow bonds to hang in there, but I will say, remember, bonds do have they still have risk inside of them, right? You have duration risk, right? You have interest rate risk, right? Those are things there. In a bond, go back to 2022, bond market went down 10%, right? They can still go down. So in this, I would like you to probably think more towards money markets and then U.S. Treasuries. U.S. Treasuries are essentially what we label as risk-free because U.S. government's not going to fall on their debt. What are they going to do? They're just going to raise taxes. So that's why, they literally link that. The 10 years labeled as the risk-free rate for that reason. So in the taxable account, we think it is a great option to utilize, but make sure you have low-risk assets in there that are labeled as your emergency fund. Again, looking at you, money market, looking at you, U.S. Treasuries. So taxable accounts, a great option in there for your emergency fund. Not our favorite, though. What's second on the list? I listed this one as number 2 because I think it's just most common. It's what we see, but it's not number 1 for a reason. Most common, what we'll see is people just have money in the bank. And when I say in the bank, I'm referring to more like brick and mortar locations and likely just like their checking account. Even if you have a brick and mortar, when I say brick and mortar, like an actual bank with a location that you can walk into, because there's a lot of cost to run all those bank branches. And what happens, you usually see much lower rates on checking, if anything, and then extremely low rates on your savings. So that is a place that can serve as a fine emergency fund. Our main issue here is with those such low yields, heck, if there's any inflation, you're likely losing purchasing power here. And purchasing power, it's very nice to look at the bank and see, hey, I got my 20,000 buckaroos, not going anywhere. It says 20,000 every day for many years, but cost of eggs, cost of anything at the grocery store has gone up substantially. So while you still have your 20,000, the purchasing power has declined a lot because of inflation. So that's why this is a good option because it's in cash. We don't love it long-term because we're likely losing purchasing power. I also listed cash here. Don't love cash as your emergency fund. One, I know you're not getting any interest because it's probably sitting in your safe or your mattress. Speaking of your safe, make sure you have a fireproof safe because if the house burns down, hope that doesn't happen. But if it does, most homeowners insurance policies will insure like $250 of cash. So if you are keeping large amounts of cash as the emergency fund, don't love that for two reasons. One, much higher risk if something goes wrong in the house and you don't have a fireproof safe or any other natural disaster for that matter. And you're not getting any interest, so you're definitely losing purchasing power. So where does that bring us? What's our favorite? Well, you probably were leaning this way, right? The high yield savings. And not only a high yield savings, we want a high yield savings at one of the online banks. Why? Because online banks are the only ones that are offering attractive rates. And even though those rates have come down a little bit, they're still a lot more attractive than your brick and mortar. And this is where we always plug in the Allies of the world, the Marcuses of the world, the Laurel Roads of the world, the Capital Ones of the world, the American Expresses of the world, where they're giving you a good interest rate. I'm not going to say a rate here because then it ages the video as soon as rates change. But you know that if you Google search any of those, they're all probably going to be in a very similar range. Maybe they vary by 0.5%, but they're likely numerous full percentages higher than what your brick and mortar bank is offering. So when you start to think through my rainy day fund, my emergency fund, where is the best place to be looking? To me, there's only one option. I mean, even in all of our financial plan, we call it your level one emergency fund. Where is that always at? It's always a high yield savings. We want you to get good interest. We want you to get a good rate for keeping that amount in there. Because again, if you're watching this and you're our usual demographic, right? Physicians, your emergency fund number is probably pretty large. You're watching this as any other high income professional, your emergency fund is pretty large. But even if you're just watching this, as anybody, you want to get a better rate of return, and those online banks and those high yield savings from those online banks are the best way to accomplish that. And even there, sometimes they're not even keeping pace with inflation, but it's a lot better than 0.01 at the local credit union or the local bank branch. So if you are hoarding cash, which I hope all of you are, we would definitely say that emergency fund is probably one of the most fundamental foundational pieces of your financial plan. Look to a high yield savings. Try to avoid credit cards, avoid 401k loans, withdrawals, even HELOCs. Be very careful there. If you're just stashing away in a brick and mortar bank in the checking, hey, it's better than nothing. Again, cash, just be very aware that we are losing purchasing power. We do have some concerns of making sure the actual money is physically secure for any other type of natural disasters or any home issues. Because again, homeowners insurance isn't going to say, oh, you had $50,000 in cash? Sure, we believe you. Here's $50,000. That's why they're usually extremely limited. I think it's like 250 is like the universal number on those. So keep an eye on those items. 3 best, 3 worst. One thing to take away from this, no matter what though, have an emergency fund is a vital piece of your plan. As always, if you have questions, drop those below. Comments, questions, concerns, drop those. You can also click on the link below, send us some more private questions. You can also join the WealthKeel Weekly on there. Hope then this one was a helpful one, very common topic. Emergency funds are probably one of the most popular topics out there. And again, huge part of the financial plan. So as always, thanks for hanging out with me for the last, a little bit less than 15 minutes on this one. We'll call it 15 minutes or so. As always, I'll catch you on the next video.